So, welcome back to Ethics TV. I'm Jonathan, and today I'm joined by Sarah Lloyd Favaro, who is the co-founder of Learn Bold, a platform that brings forward responsible AI learning and development. She is on a mission to help people embrace the AI future responsibly. Now, I have been doing my cyber stalking on Sarah for several days now, and I think it's rare to meet someone with such an extensive background, specifically in learning and development. I mean, we're talking, without revealing any ages here, 2.5 decades of solid professional experience in this area. And so I've read some really pertinent pieces that you've published online, not least on the Learn Bold site, which are vignettes rather than New Yorker level
Yes.
long forms. And I think that's important too, because they're arguably the most important parts, like fundamentals, like the importance of transparency in building trust, and the dual need to educate along with that. And I think these things, which I've been studying of yours in the last 3 days, are really resonant with me anyway. And anyone who's watching this will know that that's the case. But I would love to know from your perspective, what led you towards, obviously I've mentioned the learning and development background, but what led you from the days that you were at Verizon, let's say, to end up in this AI world? What happened?
hmm Well, great question, Jonathan. I kind of, just fell into training because my first job after college was actually at Disneyland Paris. And I ended up in a deli, and I was like, this is not why I went to college. And I thought I've got to like look around to see if there's anything else that I can do here. And so I auditioned to be a new hire trainer there and got the job. So was able to do like kind of part-time in French and English, welcome all the new hires. So that's how I got started in kind of learning and development. And then the job after that was in technical training. It was in, the internet boom, that bubble there, and doing a cross country consulting training in front end and back end web database technologies. So I really loved that, just building things, and building a product or building something that it was digital, but it still was something I had built, with my hands on the keyboard. So I love doing that, and I love sharing that, excitement with other people and helping them create, digital transformation and websites. And then, I did a few different things, but I ended up at a startup, in a software as a service startup. So that's where I got my first taste of predictive AI. Didn't even really know that I was doing AI at the time because I was more on the enablement side, the support side, but our developers were doing it. And then at Verizon, I got into a data science academy that I actually was a participant, and then I was launching it as the inaugural data science upskilling program for the entire workforce. And so that was really, kind of a seminal moment to be the evangelist of this program. And then since just this past year, really, I've just, I feel like I've, dived in the deep end and just done everything as wide and deep in terms of AI to just upskill myself and talk to other people, work with a lot of partners. And it's just so fascinating. And there, because it does have so many aspects to it, including that ethical aspect that is so important to to realize that some people may not be realizing. So that's
Hmm.
kind of my trajectory to where I am now.
But it's also answered a question which I wasn't going to ask you, which was how you ended up doing a dual degree in psychology and French language. And now the Disneyland made so much sense there. So the French Disneyland kind of link I saw. But I have to ask, in terms of the ethical side, there are the schools of thought. Let's take the Sam Harris School, which
Hmm.
is Sam's view is this is an existential threat. The genie is long out of the bottle.
Hmm.
The fact that we aren't in absolute catatonic shock and anxiety is a miracle.
Yeah.
And then the other end of the spectrum, we've got the Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz, which is, the last thing we should be doing is regulating or thinking about how to put a cap on these things. That will harm innovation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Humans will find a way to survive any form of robot uprising if there were such a thing, but ultimately, these things that we're building are going to build more solutions than problems. So we've got this kind
Hmm.
of spectrum of worry with the
Yeah.
Sam Harris on one end and Mark Andreessen on the other. Um,
Right.
did you arrive at this ethical theme through an existential threat lens, or was it more kind of neutral on that?
Well, I will say, as being a parent and really having my children grow up as guinea pigs in the social media age, you know, even though I tried so hard to do what I could to help them, it just is an addictive technology. It's all about engagement, but to the point of addiction. And I think that's true for adults as well, but even more so for children. So, seeing that and really being powerless, compared to this device, it kind of did worry me a bit. I think we could have all done a better job, just dealing with that social media. And now, we're seeing some stuff happen in the last few years. But so I think, definitely it was on my radar in terms of AI, just because that's, even the next step I mean, the social media was using the algorithms and everything, but now we've got the Gen AI. So it's just so lifelike. It's even more of it's just going to become part of the fabric, I think, of our lives, as we move forward. So, I'm quite, in the middle of these two schools of thought, because my mantra is responsible AI innovation. So I think there's a way to be innovative, and there's a way to do it responsibly,
Mm,
and there's a way to embrace this AI present and future, and there's a way to also look at it prudently and just think before we mindlessly act. Sometimes, it will get the better of us, and that's okay, as long as it, doesn't cause harm.
mm,
And I think with any, technology, it's neutral. It has no gender. You know, Even though AI has the bias issues that maybe we'll talk about, in a bit, but really it's up to us to figure out how to use it for good or for bad. And so I think if we educate ourselves and we're aware of, how things could go awry, then I think there's lots of things we can do, to make sure that we use it responsibly.
mm. Well, you guessed the conduit well, because the segue well, because um, there is a if we imagine the parts that we can control from an organizational perspective, let's say, who's looking
Mhm.
to integrate Gen AI to their workflow processes, and
Mhm.
they can learn bold. For instance, your organization can assist them in understanding how they can be more educated on the opportunities, and maybe even use some of the tools that you have and things like that. So
Mhm.
that's part that is inside the aperture of being able to be managed responsibly under a form of responsible control. And
Yeah.
then there's the large language models, which are external to those things, which
Mhm.
are in some cases owned by companies that may not necessarily have the same moralistic structures as the original organizations. And so,
True.
how do you reconcile that, and how do you address that if, for instance, an organization said, well, I've heard that large language models suck all our information out and selling them to the highest bidder. So I understand that how we can use things responsibly is
Mhm.
all of the rest of the tools involved. Are they also being used responsibly by the people who've created them?
Yeah. I mean, that is definitely a quandary to figure out, does everybody have the same level of integrity that maybe I do or you do? And, I think the larger corporations like Microsoft, for example, that I studied extensively in terms of their responsible AI framework, they definitely have an extensive network of individuals who are working to ensure that their systems are responsible. Now, there's with these LLMs, there's always going to be failures. And so there's always got to be that continuous monitoring and testing and retraining, just ad nauseum. It can't ever stop. And we've even seen with a company of that size, mistakes in the past, and they will continue in the future. So I think there's just going to be bad actors out there, and there's going to be maybe bad corporations out there, who are using the technology to, for profit and but not looking to ensure they're not harming others. So I think that's why I'm, for example, and I have other people that I've met. I've joined a lot of organizations who have their purpose statement as being to mainstream responsible AI by 2030, for example. I'm part of AI 2030.
Mm.
Um, and so it's really almost like a grassroots type of network of a lot of like-minded individuals who find each other's work fascinating and really compelling, and then joining forces together from different facets of, professional lives, such as yes, people maybe who, I've met a woman with a doctor of philosophy in ethics. So, she would be a great person
Mm.
for this show, but also people working in healthcare, people working in fintech and ed tech and in obviously law and policy and regulation and, many different walks of life. So getting together and having these conversations, and a lot of these people, especially in Washington, D.C., where I'm from, there's international organizations like the IMF, and so we have quite a bit of representation from internationally global. And so it's important to explore how different nations, how different, entities are governing AI, through the term AI governance, and seeing what's working, what's not, what's enforceable, what's not, learning lessons from a lot of data privacy, because we have a lot of history of a good regulation there.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't have a great answer to tell you definitively, but I think those are some of the things that I've found I can pursue that help me just as an individual in continuing to learn and meet people who educate me on things I didn't know about, and I would hope that there are many people in corporations and large organizations who are doing the same and are public stewards, though no one can never guarantee that, but that would be the hope that
Yeah.
I would have.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. And surely that's all we, I mean, other than trying to build an alternative from scratch, then yes, all we can have is hope that the who guards the guards is equally as responsible. And it's an interesting one because I'm not going to politicize this, certainly not partisan this conversation, but I have to just mention the fact that we're speaking on the day of the US presidential elections
Yes, yes,
and you're in Washington, despite the background.
that is correct. Yes.
So I have to just ask a token question based on which actually isn't politicized in any way, but it's relevant of the day that
Mhm.
Do you feel as if there are people in the Senate or in the House of Representatives or in any part of the mechanism of power in the United
Mhm.
States that have a really good handle on what the opportunities and risks are of artificial intelligence and are, you know, the you of the of outside of politics, but inside the mechanism. Do
Mhm.
you find that is it maybe there's one party or another, or either side of the aisle is more aware, or are there particular individuals that you've noticed that you think, you know what, if they were able to get anywhere near the kind of having a voice that would be heard,
Mhm.
maybe in
Mhm.
Congress or something, then that would be good for us all. Have you felt that in any way?
What I have found is that, through some of these organizations, conferences I've been a speaker at, or, just meeting different people, that there are leaders, who do also speak on these topics. Some maybe of one party. I remember clearly going to a conference. I think it was a couple weeks ago, and this person had, a very interesting take and a lot of convincing arguments about why AI is to the benefit of all of us, and financial is part was part of that equation. However, there are some people who may take offense at that certain slant. And I think it's very important to be bipartisan in anything having to do with AI, just because it is so widespread, it's so multidisciplinarian, it's going to touch every piece and part and parcel of our lives. That it's really hard to have one stance versus
Mhm.
the other. So I think those who will be successful are going to be able to be, neutral and listen to, both sides and figure out things that are going to work as a compromise, for in terms of policies or, any sorts of governance or regulation.
Mm.
Um, and there's going to be a lot of trial and error, I think, just as we go forth. And it's hard to know with the United States, just because we don't have a particular, quote unquote law, federal law at the moment. We have some state laws that have come out, like in Colorado, for example, has been a leader in that space. And it'll be interesting to see about the EU AI Act, and how things actually play out. Any people who are not abiding, and actually they're able to enforce some of the fines and penalties, and see if that has any bearing on how things may play out in the United States. I mean, I will be very interested to see, and I think it changes so quickly that it's a little bit overwhelming, honestly, to keep track of all the different ways that one could regulate or govern AI.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, for me, I find it seems pretty obvious that Asimov's laws of robotics should be made into a global legislation of causing no harm
mhm,
and so forth. I mean, it seems
right.
I think it will only become obvious to lawmakers when something absolutely catastrophic happens, and then it will become retrospectively
Right.
obvious because, but I mean, it's directly in front of us that it could be applied. I think
Right.
it's hard, it's potentially it goes against the Mark Andreessen view of, let's not regulate anything because it will harm innovation. My view is, I think I think even if you had kind of like a very basic three or four kind of overarching rules of what we build in AI, I don't
Mhm,
think that should limit innovation that much. But tell me
mhm,
about Learn Bold now. So, and
mhm.
this is the chance for the kind of the sales pitch, but I think it's really important what you're doing, and I wanted to ensure that had a stage here as well. So,
Yeah.
people can go to the Learn Bold website. The description, the link is in the description. But um, what is it? What is it for? Who is it for? What's the ideal user stroke customer of that?
Mhm.
How will that progress moving forward? What's the future of Learn Bold?
Sure. I would say the ideal client is a small to medium business or organization, nonprofit, for example, who knows, somewhat about AI. They've maybe dabbled, but they don't necessarily have, let's say, an AI foundation or an AI policy or anybody who is focusing on AI, for their organization. And, it's not a mom and pop shop, so they know that they need to kind of get on the bus. But they also know that they probably just need some support and guidance in how to kind of get started and it's not get overwhelmed and also deal with third-party vendors because that's frequently how smaller businesses or organizations go with off-the-shelf types of things. And you want to just make sure that you're not getting a hodgepodge of crazy AI hooks that you don't know where things are going or where your data is ending up. So I think those are the types of people. It's just helping them to kind of get a handle on what's happening and feel that they have a trusted advisor with them. And to speak to the learning piece, the learning and development, Learn Bold, is to really help everybody within that organization. The leadership, of course, they're going to be the ones carrying the torch. So they'll need to be, up there and not hiding or saying something that really could be used against them later. But also, the different pockets of the workforce, because all of our jobs, mine, yours, everybody's, they're all going to change quite drastically. They already are. And so helping people make those changes and helping organizations with organizational development to transform their workforce versus, cutting their workforce. So that's a big ethical question as well that I ponder, how will our society change when there will be less need for human labor in certain tasks or tactical work that we've done, in the past. And it's interesting, and I'm sure you're well aware of this, is that it is such a creative technology too, so it can do really some great work that we used to think, oh, only humans could do. So how do we still focus on what makes us human and where do we kind of just I don't know, I grapple with this even myself, I've even thought like, gosh, I need to really sharpen some of my like negotiation skills because that's something that I think, okay, that's something that's really human to human, coming up with partnerships, ways to, help one another and amplify one's effect. Those things I think are human interactions that I see continuing. So those are skills, negotiation skills, persuasion skills, communication skills that I all think will be very, very important. So I even feel like, okay, maybe I should join Toastmasters and just make sure that I'm amplifying the skills, sharpening my strengths. Because some of the stuff that I did before, I won't have to do again.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And, I hope that different employers will do the ethical thing and will try to, to look at their workforce and shape them and give them opportunities not only to upskill in AI, but also to transform and perhaps move into new directions and explore new opportunities.
Well, yeah, I hear you. And I mean, I feel that one of the things that humans could do more of that is completely free of charge and is uniquely human is compassion. And so
Mhm.
with the communication side you're mentioning and the kind of the persuasion skills and stuff, I think the compassion skills are something that if we all were able to have more compassion for one another and even for ourselves, then I think the world would be a nicer place. And I think that it's something that is so uniquely human that I am saying this even from being a keynote speaker for many years with a bunch of TED Talks under the hood. I feel still that if it was out of Toastmasters versus um, uh, holding genuine compassion for one another, which is such an entirely free of charge thing to do and has an enormous
Course.
positive impact on everything.
Mhm,
It's not
mhm.
something that no artificial intelligence in our lifetime or our children's children lifetime will hold a candle to in terms of the inexplicable part, the
Mhm.
illogical part of how
Yes.
gratitude and compassion and empathy works. And I love the fact that we have, as a human race, this uh, it's in some ways certainly not finitely tapped yet ability
Yeah.
to have empathy, for instance. And I think that while we have done a lot in terms of our let's say intellectual skills, and we've tried to become smarter, I think our focus on logical intelligence has somehow deprioritized emotional intelligence. And yeah, so I'm hoping that we can, as a human race, double down on our emotional intelligence and let the robots be better at playing chess than we are. But we have
Mhm.
more of an ability to hug someone and let them know that everything's going to be okay, which is a lot different than a two-dimensional text or even a robot saying it, who we already know for sure because we programmed it doesn't actually have the compassion.
Right.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, true. Yeah, so true. And I mean, I think that I that's one of the things that skills I have, luckily, is compassion and kindness. So I know that I will continue to use that above everything else. I hope that others will too, and they will sharpen, that kindness and help others. The one thing that was interesting that I did read about, and I don't know how I feel about this, is that, and I have actually a friend who works with AI and individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and just older adults who perhaps are lonely. And I think, it was, I read some studied how, obviously the human interaction is going to be, the best, but that having an AI that you can talk to, it does decrease loneliness. Now, perhaps it would increase other things that we don't want it to increase, that I alluded to before, like addiction, or, like in terms of the social media or whatever. Um, but it's interesting to think about that, and not to say that, I would want that to replace any sort of human contact, but I would say in the absence of any other intervention, let's say somebody who has no next of kin, or is a complete shut-in. It was interesting to read that that may just help somebody, who really had no other alternative, at least have, a uptick, or a decrease in loneliness. um so it'll be interesting to see, and then of course there was an article in the New York Times about character.ai, and a, a teenager who committed suicide. so there's always going to be those outliers and things that we need to watch out for. And obviously I think character.ai, now has a lot. I don't know if they're even still, servicing or people or things at this point, but so we've got to look at these cases and figure out how can we improve. And I think that's just something that happens so frequently, is that we deploy solutions and we don't adequately test them. And then we don't continuously monitor them. And that's, so unique with AI, is you're going to get this drift based upon, the data that it's churning every day. And you have to continuously look at what's going on, because it may, be drifting in the wrong direction and start, responding inappropriately. And so that's something that I have, luckily, a lot of experience actually building responsible AI chatbots, and knowing how to create system prompts that are really going to stand the test of time. Now, those have gone through many, many iterations, of course, because you do one draft and you test it and something got through. It could be a prompt injection, or it could be, just an unintended behavior back from your bot. So then you go back and you keep going, and you perhaps larger organizations have AI red teams, and they set up their war room and they try to break their applications and whatnot. So but that's something that I think is hard, because that takes a lot of resources, and it's almost like that's not the fun part, right? The fun part is like, oh my God, we're creating this new, amazing product, and it's go to market time, and our customers are so excited, and then it drops, and then it's like, oh my gosh, all of that monitoring and maintenance, that's not the cool, fun, sexy part, but that is going to be imperative. And we'll have to, as a society, devote a lot of resources, and maybe there'll be other AIs too, doing that as well. But we will need to really focus on that, because those AI is just not a stable, as we know, technology, and we don't quite know all everything about how it works. So we've got to just check in on it and audit it frequently to see.
We do indeed. Well, I think that's a great place to start, not least the fact that I have 7 days until my life's work, the system effective lifestyle filter I'm bringing to market, called Self, which is an adaptive AI personal language model filter to the web, that's launching in 7 days. So I know the feeling in terms of the getting ready for that to drop there. And no, it's been great speaking to you, and lovely to hear about the work that you're doing with LearnBold as well. And I'll put the links in the descriptions. And yeah, I'm just really grateful for your time, and on this day of all days, speaking to me from Washington, D.C. I didn't think I was going to speak to someone from Washington on election day. So that's
Well, I agreed, because I thought it might be a distraction, because, last time around this went for days and days and days. So, I thought, oh gosh, I don't want to be watching TV, all night and stuff. So I thought this would be a good time, actually, just to keep my mind off of things until things got a little more
right. Well, I'm happy to be in the distraction, and I'm sure that the audience will be over the moon with hearing from you as well. So I really appreciate it, Sarah. I can't wait to have you back on in the future, and we can see where we both got up to.
Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. It's been my absolute pleasure, and congratulations on your launch. And I can't wait to learn more about that.
Lovely. Cheers. Thank you.